Introduction to Biology, Part 4. The concept of biology as a single coherent field arose in the 19th century. Over the 18th and 19th centuries, biological sciences such as botany and zoology became increasingly professional scientific disciplines. But our fascination with biology has a long history. Even early humans had to study the animals that they hunted and know where to find the plants that they gathered for food. The invention of agriculture was the first great advance of human civilization. Medicine has been important to us from earliest history as well. The earliest known medical texts are from China, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. In classical times, Aristotle is often considered to be the first to practice scientific zoology. Although the Babylonians, Assyrians, Egyptians, Chinese, and Indians amassed much biological information, they lived in a world believed to be dominated by the unpredictable demons and spirits. With the emergence of Greek civilization, however, those mystical attitudes began to change. One of the earliest Greek philosophers, Thales of Miletus, maintained that the universe contained a creative force that he called physis. An early progenitor of the term physics, he also postulated that the world and all living things in it were made from water. The first major biological observations were made by the ancient Greek naturalist Aristotle. Aristotle owes his fame to his reputation as a researcher in zoology and biology. In his biological writings, he appears to have a good knowledge of over 500 animal species, while his descriptions indicate that he must have performed anatomic research on more than 50 of them. In his 3 biological works, he gives a full and detailed description of the various animal characteristics. The work of Aristotle never passed into oblivion. In 8th century Byzantium, his writings enjoy fame and high reputation, while in 12th century they are translated into Latin and gain publicity in the West. Aristotle is the father of biology, which retained the principles, content, and form that he had introduced and defined until the 19th century. Theophrastus was born in 370 BC and was a student of Aristotle, who bequeathed to Theophrastus his writings and designated him as his successor at his school. He was a scholar, botanist, biologist, and physicist. The most important of his books are 2 large botanical treatises, Inquire into Plants and On the Causes of Plants, which constituted the first systemization of the botanical world and were major sources for botanical knowledge during antiquity and the Middle Ages. On the strength of these works, some call him the father of botany. Around the middle of the 4th century BCE, ancient Greek science reached a climax. The Greek physician Hippocrates established the school of medicine on the Aegean island of Kos around 400 BCE. The most famous of the centers of learning were the library and the museum in Alexandria. From 300 BCE until around the times of Christ, all significant biological advances were made by the physicians at Alexandria. Perhaps the last of the ancient biological scientists of note was Galen of Pergamum, a Greek physician who practiced in Rome during the middle of the 2nd century BCE. His early years were spent as a surgeon at the gladiatorial arena, which gave him the opportunity to observe details of the human anatomy. Because his work was extensive and clearly written, Galen's writings nevertheless dominated medicine for centuries. The Great Greek period of scientific investigation came to an end. After Galen, there were no significant biological investigations for many centuries. From the 3rd until the 11th century, biology was essentially an Arab science. Although the Arabic scholars themselves were not great innovators, they discovered the works of such men as Aristotle and Galen, translated those works into Arabic, studied them, and wrote commentaries about them. During the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci risked danger by participating in a human dissection and making detailed anatomical drawings that are still considered among the most beautiful ever made. Invention of the printing press and the ability to reproduce woodcut illustrations meant that information was much easier to record and disseminate. One of the first illustrated biology books is a botanical text written by German botanist Leonhard Fuchs in 1542. Binomial classification was established by Carolus Linnaeus in 1735, using Latin names to group species according to their characteristics. Microscopes opened up new worlds for scientists. In 1665, Robert Hooke used a simple compound microscope to examine a thin silver of cork. He observed that the plant tissue consists of rectangular units that remind him of the tiny rooms used by monks. He called these units cells. In 1676, Anton von Leeuwenhoek published the first drawings of living single-celled organisms. Theodor Schwann added the information that the animal tissue is also composed of cells in 1839. During the Victorian era and throughout the 19th century, natural science became something of a mania. Thousands of new species were discovered and described by intrepid adventurers and by backyard botanists and entomologists alike. In 1812, George Cuvier described fossils and hypothesized that Earth had undergone successive bouts of creation and destruction over long periods of time. On November the 24th, 1859, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, the text that forever changed the world by showing that all living things are interrelated, and that species were not separately created but arise from ancestral forms that are changed and shaped by adaptation to their environment. While much of the world's attention was captured by biology questions at the macroscopic organism level, a quiet monk was investigating how living things pass traits from one generation to the next. Gregor Mendel is now known as the father of genetics, although his papers on inheritance, published in 1866, went largely unnoticed at the time. His work was rediscovered in 1900, and further understanding of inheritance rapidly followed. The 20th and 21st centuries may be known to future generations as the beginning of the biological revolution, beginning with Watson and Crick explaining the structure and function of DNA in 1953. All fields of biology have expanded exponentially and touch every aspect of our lives. Medicine will be changed by the development of therapies tailored to the patient's genetic blueprint. We may grow batteries from bacteria or light buildings with bioluminescent fungi. The possibilities are endless. Biology is just coming into its own. Hi, I'm Andrew Massey. I hope that you found something interesting in these basic biology tutorials, and also learned a bit about the tremendous facts that create my, your, and everyone's world.